Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Macro Pro and Friends. I'm Diann Cohen, and I welcome you to this very special edition. Today, we are going to be talking about copy services, everything from how do you object to copy service bills to why do applicant copy services attorneys, I should say, request their own set of records. So before I do that, I have some housekeeping I need to take care of. So today's webinar is worth 1 CEU. You need to be logged on to the webinar using a link from GoToWebinar in order for them to be able to send you their certificate, because they'll be able to log your time in attendance. We have handouts today for you, so you need to download those. There are bios, there's some codes, and a copy of the fee schedule available for you to download. If you have any questions today, you may put them into the question box, and we will try to get to those. Now, we already solicited questions and got them, so no promises we'll be able to get to it, but we may be able to do a second episode of this if we have enough interest. And then you can watch this on the Macro Pro YouTube channel should you want to see it again. Now, before we get started, I have a question for you. What percentage do you think copy service bills are to the entire claims file? So if you would put that inside of the question box, and we are going to have Miss Wendy maybe read some of those out to us in just a few minutes after we introduce our speakers. So again, the question for you is, what percentage do you think copy service fees are to the entire claim file? All right, so today we have with us members of the Coalition of Professional Photocopiers. We have Dan Mora, who is the president. He is also the owner of Gemini Legal, and he has 22 years experience. We have Mike Callen, who is the vice president and treasurer, and he is with Republic Document Management. He has 29 years of service. And then we have Stephen Schniedier, and he is the secretary. Steve no longer owns a copy service, but he used to, and he has a lot of knowledge and understands the regs. He is an expert in so many things, and we're very happy to have him as part of our panel today. And then we have Patty Waldeck of Macro Pro, the owner, and she has 35 years experience. Thank you all so much for being here today and joining us for that. So Wendy, do we have anybody put down what percentage they think the claims are?
We do. They range 5%, 11%, 15%, 80, 15%, 10%, 15%, $5,000, 25%, 20%, 10%, 1.3%, approximately 30%, 5 to 7%, but the fees are always outrageous. Sometimes I get 2 bills, 10, 25%, 25%, and 3%.
Wow, thank you so much, Wendy. So I see there's this huge variation. So I am going to surprise most of you. So the answer is it's a very tiny fraction of any claims total, and that is, it is 0.06, less than a tenth, not even a 0.5% of the claims file. And that was done through a report by the WCRB, their end of year annual report. So I think that's the first thing we want to do, is show everybody that copy service bills get a lot of action, and it gets a lot of conversations going, but it really is a very small portion of the file. All right, so Dan, can you tell us a little bit about the coalition, who they are and what the goals are?
Yeah, thank you, Diann. I'm so happy to be here, get a chance to talk to you guys. So I appreciate your attention and joining. So first off, just a little history. Prior to 2015, our fees were unregulated. And being unregulated, we didn't need to lobby. We didn't need to go defend ourselves at the department, at the DWC. That changed in 2012 with the announcement of a fee schedule. And at that time, it was our initial phase of getting organized. That was a different coalition at that time, and we were around for about 2 years to help shape the regulatory changes that happened in 2015. Coming up to 2018, we had 3 years worth of data on what was more than 3 years, because in 2012 we started to feel the results of the fee schedule. So about 5 years of data I brought to the DWC, and the AD quickly told me you need to get organized in order to come to me with data. So in 2018 we got organized, and we now make up a dozen or so of both defense and applicant firms. A big goal of ours was to clarify what we do, to be clear about what we do, but also there was a lot of bad actors. As some of you that have been in the industry for some time, there's a lot of bad actors that were floating around and getting away with some poor business practices. So our goal as an organization, as the Coalition of Professional Photocopiers, is to advocate for proper discovery processes and to protect us, to protect this legal process that is a due process right for all parties. We have a few goals in mind. We need to unify our message. This is a great way for us to start that, increase our visibility, and advocate for proper processes and behaviors, and also be a trusted source to the administration, giving data and giving real-time feedback about how this very important legal process is going. So is that good enough for an introduction, Diann?
I think so. I think it's one thing we didn't mention was we are trying to put together best practices so that people can understand that, at least the members of the coalition are really trying hard to make sure that we follow the letter of the law and that we're doing everything we're supposed to do. So thank you very much for that. So Stephen, let's start with you, because you're the guy kind of with the processes and understanding of how things should be done really well. So we have a question. They want to know, how do they properly object to an applicant copy service invoice?
Aha. So luckily for you guys, that is described in detail, both in the labor code and in the regulations. So if you look at labor code section 4622, it includes what should happen at the moment that you receive a copy service invoice and how to proceed with it. And in that code section, it says that you are to either pay or object within 60 days. And if you intend to object, you must do so timely within that 60 days. To prove that, you should definitely have a proof of service attached to your EOR or objection. EOR is explanation of review. That is a DWC form that you use to lodge your objection. So following 4622 and regulation 9794, within 60 days, you fill out that EOR form and you mail it with a proof of service to the copy service and the applicant attorney. And again, those methods are described very carefully in the code. So all you have to do is open up your labor code and your regulation, and it will tell you exactly what to do.
Well, Stephen, you just mentioned the applicant attorney. So why is it the applicant attorney will provide in writing a request for the records, but then within that same 30-day period, they send a subpoena?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it should be pointed out that both in the labor code and in the fee schedule regulations, it says that there's to be a 30-day period where there are no services when the applicant attorney requests records. So oftentimes people come to the conclusion, they read that and they say, well, the applicant attorney is required to do a request for records and then required to wait 30 days. And that's not true. So for one thing, oftentimes an applicant attorney will order records from his copy service, and the copy service doesn't know whether there was a written request for records or not. And if they knew it, they wouldn't know when it was served on them. They don't know the time frame. So that's the first problem as to why you probably see that. No nefarious purposes on the copy service. They probably just don't know any different. So they're just proceeding. However, there are going to be times when they are going to have awareness, or at least you know that there's been this request for records, and then you see a subpoena within the 30 days. So the idea there is the services are not going to be completed within 30 days usually. So let's say the average copy service production between subpoena and actual delivery of the records is around 30 days. If that's true, then what happens is copy service might decide, well, I'll serve my subpoena and I'll start working on it. And if in the middle of that records actually come in that the applicant attorney is satisfied with, then I'll just stop or I'll cancel the services. And you say, well, but then that's going to incur a cancellation fee. I don't believe a cancellation fee would be payable in that situation. If you could prove that the subpoena was served and services were started within the 30-day period, and then you produced all the records the applicant attorney requested, and when he requested them in writing, and you produced them within those 30 days, that'd be something that you'd want to object on an EOR and put that in front of a judge and say, I don't want to pay these bills because that did not comply with the fee schedule regulations.
Great.
I might add, it does in Labor Code 5307.9, it indicates no services are chargeable or payable that are performed within the 30 days. And, you know, as a practice, as a best practice, some of us aren't doing any work within that 30-day window, and some people are choosing to do some work within that window.
And there again, it's a great point, Dan. And it says you don't have to pay for services provided within the 30-day window. And the problem is when that was written, most copy services broke their invoice down into all the various services. So if that was the situation, then you could go through with your red pen and say, well, I'm not going to pay for the preparation of the subpoena, the service of the subpoena. But if the actual copying and delivery and that stuff fell outside of the 30 days, you know, then I might have to pay that. The flat rate that structure that they went to with the fee schedule complicated that. So again, you know, you have copy services that take different approaches to that 30-day window. Most of the copy services that talk to me, if they're aware that the applicant attorney requested records in writing, they're waiting that 30 days because they want to get paid. They don't want to be a problem for you, and they don't want to get objections. So most of them that I'm aware of are waiting.
Okay, so Mike, a question. Why is it that copy services often ask for a second set of records?
So let me just kind of piggyback on what those guys were saying as well. And before I get to this question, I think this is a good question. But you know what it is with the coalition, we're putting together this best practices, and you're going to see that the copy services that are a part of our coalition are not going to be doing these services within 30 days, or they certainly won't be billing for it. And you should not pay for those services that are done prior to the 30 days. But I did want to take a minute here to thank you guys, all of you, for your time and your interest, as well as your questions. I think it's great that you did this and that you guys are attending this seminar. It tells me that you guys are interested in not only what we have to say, but you know, that this industry, you know, it stirs up some emotions and things. And so I'm just glad that you guys are here. Thank you very much for your time. The goal of this webinar is to be open and transparent. Sorry, Diann, one more thing. Open and transparent with you guys. We want to try to dispel any possible myths that might be out there, as well as give you guys some insight and helpful tips on dealing with some of these bad actors. As well as to let you guys know that we are putting together a best practices list that hopefully, well, that we know that our coalition is going to be following. Now to your question. Sorry, Diann. Why do applicant copy services ask for second sets of records? I believe the question is more along the lines of why do they bill for second sets of records? I will say that the applicant attorney will request that they have a set of records, as well as they want to send the treating physician a set of records. So you will see that there are 2 CDs on a particular order or particular invoice, and that's usually because they want to send that set of records to a treating physician or to somebody else. And is there proof is the question. There should be. And anytime that you guys would need proof of that, the copy service in question that is invoicing for that should be able to provide you with that proof. All you need to do is ask.
Let me ask a question. I know on MacroPro's invoices, when we send a second set out, it actually lists where it's going. Is that something that happens with most applicant copy services?
Yes, it should be on their invoice.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much.
And Mike, how much is a second set under the new fee schedule versus the old fee schedule?
It's $10 now. It used to be they had it where it was $30 after 30 days and $5 before. Now it's just a flat rate at $10.
All right. Okay, so Dan and Stephen, I have a question for you. So we all know that med legal costs are governed by labor codes, you know, making sure that they're used to prove or disprove a claim, also to make sure that they're reasonable and necessary. So how does an applicant copy service, you know, go through and screen this and make sure that this is exactly what is happening so it meets those criteria?
Yeah, good question. I know your audience probably has a lot of this question, and I'll start by just saying that we are following the instructions of our clients who are licensed, barred attorneys. So we tend to trust that they're going to back up what they're ordering. So when it comes to screening, I know a lot of services do a little bit of research or even a lot of research before they get it going, because the bottom line is we need to get paid, and we want to get paid on these invoices. So if we were to do something improper, the likelihood of getting paid goes down significantly. The history of accounts receivable in the copy service area is notorious. And I'll tell you, like, we do everything to avoid not trying to flirt with trying not to get paid. I'll start there. You know, secondly, there's case law that puts us in med legal expenses. And remind me, Stephen, what's that case? Is it
That's the Martinez decision in bank?
Yeah. So in bank, Martinez decision made it very clear that copy service invoices go under med legal. So technically, we are required to prove, if challenged, whether it is reasonable and necessary to for that invoice. I have some problems with that. It was reinforced with the Cohen case, also an en banc that came a couple years ago. So that's why that's where we're governed.
So Dan's kind of hitting on the point there. Labor Code 4620, when you read that, it looks like it applies mostly to medical reports. If you look at Labor Code 4620, 4621, keeps talking about medical legal reports, which would, in today's world, would be a panel QME report or an AME report. But it does include the word medical records in the definition of 4620. So, you know, before the Martinez decision, which came out in like 2013, it was kind of a general understanding, at least on the applicant side, that copy services either fell into a medical legal expense if it was related to a medical report. So if the applicant attorney ordered the records to give to an examiner to produce a report, then it was medical legal. If it wasn't, then copy services collected that under what's called a 5811 expense, attorney expense. So if you look up Labor Code 5811, mostly you don't see, it's kind of a vague thing that says attorneys can incur expenses and the parties shall sort of negotiate those expenses. And that's the way it was done. Copy services used to, those that filed liens, they put right on the lien, this is a 5811 expense or a medical legal expense. Copy service isn't aware of which one it is at the time. So when the Martinez case came along in 2013, it said, no, because records are mentioned in Labor Code 4620, then always copy services have to be medical legal expenses. Well, that was a problem because in 4620, it mentions there must be a contested claim and the services must be used to prove or disprove a contested claim. Then in 4620B, it very narrowly defines what a contested claim is, and those are for reports. That section was written in 1993, and you know, the legislative process back then to combat runaway medical legal expenses. Applicant attorneys and QMEs were, just generating reports for almost no reason, and that's what they were using to control it. Well, fast forward to today's world, you asked a very good question. How is a copy service going to fit through that narrow window of proving that that there was a contested claim and that they were reasonably and necessarily incurred? And I think the real answer that I have seen, I read a lot of I read all the WCAB panel cases that come out that involve copy services and medical legal expenses, just to sort of see what the WCAB's position is on all these things. The WCAB says, well, yeah, copy service is responsible for showing that there was a contested claim during their services, and that it was reasonably and necessarily incurred. But while an application for adjudication of claim filing is not proof of a contested claim, this is the WCAB's position, if that is combined with any other document showing that the disputes listed on the application are bona fide disputes that the parties then resolved, and that can be, a UR denial, that can be a claim denial letter, that can be, there's all these pieces of evidence that a copy service can use to prove that there was a contested claim and it was reasonable and necessarily incurred. And that's the answer to this green question on here. Does a copy service provide any screening or quality control? The answer is they really can't. There's really no way for the copy service to have all these facts. But the WCAB's position is, if the copy service produces at trial an application for adjudication of claim and at least one other piece of information that they can tie back to that one of those check boxes on the application of disputes, then the copy service has met their burden. And as long as the copy service is patient enough, there's probably a near 100% chance they're going to be able to do that. They don't want to wait that long. You probably don't want to wait that long. That's going to drag everything out, and it's going to be a lot more expensive that way. But while it looks like copy service expenses are easy to defeat using these codes, it's really not. All they got to do is wait long enough. They'll get one of these pieces of information, and then everything will be supported, and you'll end up paying plus penalties, plus interest, plus now 25%.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that explanation. There is a lot that goes into it. All right. So, Mike, let's talk about this. So, should an applicant copy service contact the claims administrator before sending out a subpoena to see if they've already provided the records and the file and the medical records?
Right, great question. And I can understand why it's being asked. But the short answer is no. There's no requirement that we get authorization from a claims administrator to subpoena the claims file. In practice, I will say that if and when a subpoena is issued for that claims file, if an objection is received, or stating, and there's a proof of service with that, stating that records have been delivered to applicant's attorney, we will cancel our services. We will stop that. But we work off of the premise that applicant's attorney is allowed, liberal discovery. Stephen can quote the case law on that. And we trust that when they do request a copy of the claims file, that it hasn't been provided yet. And so we prepare and we notice, and then we serve the subpoena for that claims file, and we try to get a copy of that for our client. A lot of you know some claims administrators, and so you might know what it's like to get a hold of them. And can you imagine if we actually needed to sit and try to do some kind of correspondence with you guys before subpoenaing those records? It's going to be a little tough to get in touch with some of you guys, and I think that would be sitting on my desk for a little while prior to issuing that subpoena. So trying to make a joke there, but really it's there's no requirement that we do check with claims administrators prior to issuing that subpoena for a claims file.
Well, Mike, imagine if I was the applicant attorney and I know so many things about the claim that you don't know. And so I asked the claims examiner for for certain records. And the claims examiner served me without a subpoena, without a copy service. They served me with what they felt I was entitled to. But I wanted things that weren't served. Okay, so I used you. I filled out a Republic order form and I asked for the claims file. If the first thing you did was call me back and say, why are you doing this? I'm not going to call Mike anymore. I'm going to call Dan. So I think any copy service that pushes back like that and makes the assumption that the applicant attorney is either doing something silly or nefarious, they're not going to be around very long. And I think the same thing probably happens on the employer side. I think if Macro Pro was calling back claims examiners and saying, tell me exactly why you ordered these records and why you need them, I don't think that'd make people very happy.
I do find it interesting that this is one of the few industries where the copy service is responsible for what the applicant attorney does. You know, the applicant attorney doesn't have to pay that bill, right? You guys end up having to absorb any cost for anything that's not paid. And so, and it's no fault of your own, you're just being that conduit to get the record. So I find that very interesting. Our industry is full.
I can't wait for Patty's questions, because Patty's all the time saying, why would you guys know that? Why would you have to know that? And we're like, technically, the way the law says, we're supposed to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, it's a different burden for sure. All right, so we got what we're calling rapid fire here. So Dan, if you would take the first question, Mike the second, and Stephen the third.
Sure. So date of service, I know that there's multiple interpretations of this, especially with copy service. We're under a flat fee. So, you know, it's all one date of service, and we interpret it as the date that the invoice is issued, that the job is complete and the invoice is issued. That's how we deem the date of service. And Stephen, you can maybe to clarify at your time, you know, what the codes that support that, but that's how we interpret it.
Let me just clarify that now. In Labor Code 4621, it defines what the date of service shall be, and that definition is further bolstered in 9793 definitions over in the regulations, and that actually says when the invoice and all reports and records have been served on the person who ordered them. So that's the technical answer.
Thank you.
How are subpoena order or reference numbers generated? Each of us use a different software, and that software generates that reference number or order number. So there's no regulation or law that issues those for us. It's a software thing.
And on that, I've noticed some software uses a year designation and a dash and then a serialized number, and some just use a serialized number. And even if they have a year in their order number, when the applicant attorney calls back later and does add-on orders, it's the prior year, and I can see why that would be confusing. And I agree with Mike. The answer is there's no real reason. So mine is, should a copy service provider reference multiple WCAB case numbers on the SDT? They either, it's not should, they could, or they could just use one of them. The subpoena would be accurate and would comply with all regulations that I'm aware of if it had just one of the case numbers on there. As long as the case numbers, I'm sure the questioner was wondering, like, sometimes cases are handled as one, they're sort of grouped together. And what if the copy service used a case number for one of the minor add-on injuries or claims instead of the one the board was using as the main claim? I don't think that is going to make any difference as far as the subpoena and the deposition purposes are concerned. Maybe it makes a difference on the invoice, but I still don't really think there's a difference in whether you captured one of the case numbers or all the case numbers. And you know, let's not forget, sometimes it starts off obviously with one case, and then the other cases get added later. So maybe the copy service worked on the file when there was only one of the case numbers.
Got it. All right, so Patty, here's a question for you. All right, for the defense finally. So Patty, if MacroPro secures records, from a location and there's going to be subsequent records that need to be gotten, how would we be able to continue to serve these records and maybe share that information with the applicant side so that there's no subpoenas in the future on that same set of records in that location?
Well, I think everybody knows with a subpoena, we have to notice the applicant side when we issue the subpoena. So the applicant attorney knows what records we're subpoenaing and where. And so that's not the question. The question is, how would we avoid it? Well, I think that the applicant attorney has the right to ask for their own records as well as what we have. Now, let me just tell you that I have had defense attorneys ask me to get the same records that the applicant service has gotten. And we have applicant services being asked to get the same records the defense has gotten. And I think it's a matter of trust that happens on the defense side, that the defense trusts the defense copy service to get the records, and the applicant trusts their service. So we don't really, other than noticing the applicant attorney, we don't really get involved in what they're going to do. It really comes down to an attorney's decision on either side.
I want to add to this a little bit. I'm sure this isn't the situation with MacroPro, but I know there are defense copy services that offer extremely low flat fee rates if an insurance company will sign a contract with them, way lower than the fee schedule. And so they're not going to provide the same level of detail in service as an applicant copy service for an interesting reason. The applicant attorney doesn't have to pay for the services when they use an applicant copy service, so they're actually much harder on them. So I'll give you a good example. Back when I was doing business, I had an applicant attorney, and the deposition of the applicant was coming up, and they were worried about a prior car accident. So they were worried about apportionment in their permanent disability. They wanted to prep the applicant on that. So they ordered records from this doctor's office, and we provided records, and the applicant attorney called back and, chewed us out and said, you didn't get the auto accident from 5 years ago records. And we said, well, we copied everything. We said we wanted everything. Go back and, you tell that doctor of blah, blah, blah. So, we go back, we tell the doctor this, hey, we're getting chewed out. Like, what's going on? Doctor said, oh, well, we didn't know you wanted the car accident. That wasn't part of the work comp claim. We just gave you the work comp file. We said, no, we said any and all. And he said, yeah, you said any and all, but it was work comp, so we only gave you work comp. The reason I'm telling you this example is the employer side using a copy service on a flat rate for whatever it is, they're just going to get whatever the doctor provides, and that's it, because that's all they get paid for. So applicant attorneys often have their favorite copy service because of this level of detail, because from then on, we knew better. And so whenever we went to a doctor's office for that applicant attorney, man, we were like, look, is there any other files or anything else out there? So there's lots of reasons why people want to use their own copy service. And technically, when you read the code, there's nothing that says the applicant attorney must use the employer's records or must use the defense copy services records. I know it makes sense to a lot of people that you shouldn't have duplicate copy service invoices from the same location. And it might be a valid objection if they actually copied the exact same pages. You might have a good objection there. But man, if the applicant copy service copied a little bit later and gets even a page or two more evidence than the employer side did, that's going to be a valid invoice to be paid. So I just don't think, given the fact that copy services make up less than 1% of all medical expenses on your claims file, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth that objecting for what, another $230.
All right, thank you for that. All right, well, Stephen, why would an attorney, you kind of mentioned this in the last question there, but why would an applicant attorney request records from a non-authorized or non-treating provider on an accepted claim? Wouldn't this be more for enforcement reasons?
Well, yeah, exactly. It would be for apportionment reasons. And apportionment's going to come up when during the applicant's deposition. And if an applicant attorney is doing their job and protecting their client's claim, they got to prepare that client for that. So, you know, it's not, a good applicant attorney is not going to hide from the facts. A good applicant attorney wants all the facts. So absolutely, they're going to go out and they're going to ask for all those records. And it is for apportionment because they want to know what you know. They want to know, they might want to know what you know even before you know it, so that they can properly prepare their client and to have a good response for you.
All right, excellent. Well, we got rapid fire up next. So Dan, Mike, and then Dan, in those orders, would you answer the question?
Yeah, so this is a good question. I know that it frustrates some payers when they receive certificates no records or cancellations. And for example, an example where we would go back out to a record location to get more records is if that applicant is treating on an ongoing basis, or they have an appointment. Yet sometimes those wires get crossed. Just practically speaking, an applicant may be seen, and the attorney wants us to go get the records. We go to the facility maybe a day after the treatment, and the records just aren't available yet. There's a lot of actual nuances there that could cause a cancellation or a CNR. And again, there's lots of little incidences. I'll just say, and I'll repeat that, you know, our job is to try to get paid for the work that we do. So we're not none of this, you know, from my perspective, and I think from the coalition's perspective, our job is to root out bad players. And so I can say with confidence that most of our members are not making phantom invoices. So this is all legitimately ordered.
Thank you, Mike.
So why would a copy service provider serve and bill for a subpoena several months after the preparation date? That goes back to the proof or the service date that we had talked about previously. And really the way that it works is once the records are delivered, or if a CNR is copied or provided, or the order has been canceled, that's going to be our data service. And so obviously all of that happens long after the preparation of a subpoena and the servicing of that subpoena. How does a copy service provider determine whether sales tax is applicable? We don't determine that. The old BOE, I think it's now California Department of Tax and Fee Administration, they're the ones who determine what we can charge sales tax on. But just to give you a kind of a rough idea, is that if we copy records and we deliver a physical set of records, either a CD or a paper, to our client, then there is going to be sales tax. If it's delivered electronically via the web or an email, then there shouldn't be any sales tax on that. But please understand, sales tax, when it is charged, it is payable, and it's required that you guys pay that.
Mike, can I jump in on that middle question there about it taking several months past an SDT preparation date? So again, back when I was in business, I would serve a subpoena, and there were lots of locations that just weren't very cooperative. They were uncooperative, and it would take a long time for them to actually produce records. It would actually sometimes take months. So we would go to our applicant attorney and say, look, man, it's been like 3 months. We want to cancel this. And we had applicant attorneys that said, absolutely do not cancel that. Keep bugging them, keep trying. I didn't like it because that you couldn't make money on that file as a copy service, but it is not strange at all for it to take several months to get records from a location. I mean, would you agree? Does that happen to you guys nowadays?
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
You know, and the longer it goes, obviously, the worse it is for us. But, you know, it's, yeah, you will see that service gate though after we finally do copy it. And that's why it would come like that.
Even as a defense copy service, we also have long delays from time to time, depending on the facility we're trying to get records from. So it is universal across, you know, every type of service.
And
All right,
sometimes you can cancel it, right? You'll cancel your service. And a year later, the client will come back and say, hey, look, would you please try again? And that time you're successful.
That's true. All right, Dan, I think you have one more there.
So why are WC030 requested services charges billed for uploading, summarizing, indexing, tabulating? Actually, I think this is for you guys at Macro Pro. You guys use this, right?
We do, Patty.
Well, we do when the defense requests it. And it's a part of the new regs where prior to the changes, it didn't matter what the defense requested, we couldn't provide it. So if they request certain things now, and it's not that totally, but at whatever they request, we do try to provide it because they're our boss. And if they need it, especially certain things, then we do it. Now, it doesn't happen that often, really. We try not to do anything extra if one of our clients wants to be under the regulations. Most don't, but we talk to them.
Yeah,
I think the short answer is you shouldn't see that on an applicant copy service bill. If you do, object.
that's what I was going to say. These things, uploading, summarizing, indexing, tabulating, is part of the flat fee. It's included in the regulations. Gemini does not charge outside of that. If there's something way out of scope, I don't know, we're scanning 10,000 records, that may be something that we would put in there, but normally we'll call you guys first and say, hey, we have this odd circumstance, there's, you know, 100,000 pages. This is going to cost us way over the fee schedule. Would you please help us by authorizing that extra fee?
And they may be referring to the actual denial of such a fee in 9982, the fee schedule regulations. It specifically says in 9982 that there shall not be a fee for summarizing, indexing, and tabulating. So that would apply though if you ask the copy service to do it.
Right. And
Yeah,
I think on the,
well, you know, I kind of misspoke in a way because we don't charge extra for those things anyway. But if they ask for other things, that is really there for other things that might be requested. Like, for instance, they want another hard copy for a doctor, or, you know, whatever they might request, or they want a medical synopsis. I mean, the defense is our boss, you know, and the defense attorney and the adjuster are our bosses. And so if they ask us for it, we get their permission and do it, because otherwise it's not allowed under the fee schedule.
yes, exactly. Something even like a medical canvassing that we do, or social media backgrounds or something like that.
Right.
So not in the fee schedule, but this gives us the ability to be able to charge them for services that they've requested. All right, so let's go on. And Dan, why is it that some applicant copy services provide a witness fee of $15 and other times not?
So technically, a party to the case is not entitled a witness fee or any custodian fees. What's that reg, Stephen?
Well, it's actually, there's a reg that says that you do have to pay a witness fee and custodian fees if it's a non-party, and those are in CCP 2020.
Okay, sorry, I had that wrong. CCP, the Code of Civil Procedure states that a party to the case is not entitled to witness fee or any other fees, but as a practice, we have there's several entities out there that just will not release records without a witness fee and or additional fees. Our clients are putting pressure on us to get the records to them so that they can, operate their case, move their case forward. So many times we are paying those fees to get the records released. I think there's some patient applicant attorneys out there that will wait, and that, and in those cases, I think some services are not charging and holding their ground on not paying those witness fees.
I think most copy services don't realize they don't have to pay a party. So that's why you have a lot of especially smaller copy services that aren't that familiar with the law, and they're just handling everything the same. So they've been handing out witness fees for years, and that's what they do. And then, along comes somebody that says, you don't have to do that. And they try not to, and now they get pressure from the defense attorney, where's my witness fee? And they don't know how to answer that. But again, there's nothing that specifically says you don't have to pay a party a witness fee. It's the opposite of that. It's that the only sections that say you do have to pay a witness fee is to non-parties. And most claims examiners, defense attorneys, they know this. You don't give the applicant a witness fee when you take their deposition. They're a party.
All right. So maybe, Dan, you can explain how a record location list is developed by an applicant copy service.
Yeah, I'll start with, I think that if you as the defense were required to use applicant only service, you wouldn't be so happy. I think that this industry is pretty, divided. It's acrimonious. And some of the clients that, over the years that I've talked to, they have zero trust in the other side. It was touched on earlier that, that then allows them to use their liberal discovery, and that is upheld by case law. The liberal discovery is the rule. So my answer to that is any means necessary. I think an applicant attorney at least a skilled applicant attorney, that, like Steven said, they want to know every detail of the case. They need to know every detail of the case in order to properly represent their applicant. And so they'll use anything in their means to try to find where the applicant has been seen from a medical perspective, previous employers, insurance companies. And I know this is a contentious area for some people because the applicant attorney is getting a party notice, a list of places that possibly defense has gone to go get records, and the applicant attorney will use that list to go get records independently. The way I think about that is they're doing the best job for the applicant that they are ethically responsible to do, is to go get as many pieces of evidence that is possible to represent their client. It's a spectrum, though. It's a spectrum. I've heard other applicant attorneys say, I don't want to know anything until defense tells me. And I've heard others that are very selective, and they're very political, and they pick just the ones that they know are really important, doctor's reports, etc. And others are just like, no, I need everything. I want everything. I want to look under every rock. So we support all, and I know that some people don't like it. It just is part of how it works in this industry.
And just to add on to that, a lot of the lists come from the fact that when an applicant comes into an office, into an applicant attorney's office, their intake is very specific. Who have you seen for this injury? Have you seen any other doctors for any other reasons? And so that intake sheet is also, it provides that list of locations that they might want to subpoena as well. So there is that part that gets the records from, the party notice that MacroPro might send. But a lot of the records that we copy come from the applicant's own listing of his past doctors that he's visited as well.
And I would say that's most typical, but where we get flack is the ones that are very aggressive, the attorneys that are very aggressive.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Thank you. All right, Steven, Why do copy service fees? Why do copy service fees bill for dates of service after a claim has been settled with a compromise and release?
Well, most of the time they shouldn't, and that would be a valid grounds for objection. You should serve an EOR on that. However, there are situations, and it's not that uncommon, where the parties will settle via compromise and release, and they will leave open certain medical issues to be settled, under a future hearing, or maybe it's future medical. They're just not sure, how the applicant's gonna play out over time, and that in the compromise and release, they will actually leave discovery open for that purpose. So I would say, 8 out of 10 times, probably that is a situation you should send an EOR and object to, at least challenge the copy service and see if they can produce evidence of that issue being left open on settlement documents.
Great, thank you.
The other part of that would be that we don't know that a case has settled.
Right.
And once we are aware of that, we will then close out any remaining requests, and that's why you would see those dates of service after a compromise and release.
Great.
But still, the unfortunate reality is they don't have to pay you for that.
Right. Thank you for telling everybody in this. All good. We told you we were going to be transparent.
Transparency.
That's it.
Exactly. All right, well, Mike, while we're on it, so this question basically boils down to, why are there multiple subpoenas served to the same location? So like at a hospital, you're asking for doctor's records, you're asking for x-rays and maybe billing. Why can't that just be one subpoena?
So understand, and it's per location, right? If a copy service, well, part of our process is that we call and we verify these locations to find out where these subpoenas need to go. If we can combine them into one, I promise you we do. But what will happen is that there's actually different witnesses, like say at a hospital, radiology, the person who would testify to the x-rays and MRI films, that's a different person than the person who is handling or who's the custodian of records for the medical file or the billing file. They are all separate custodians. And so we must issue different subpoenas for that. On top of that, it is a tracking issue for the copy service. If we were to put it all under one, let's say at Kaiser, for instance, to get medical, we want x-rays or radiology, and we want psych records, and then we want billing records. The tracking nightmare that would go along with putting that all under one is a nightmare, because we'd have to serve that exact same subpoena on everybody. And now I got records coming in every which way. So as a practical matter, it's better for the service to go ahead and separate those out. But I believe Stephen can speak to the legality, but the fact that there's a different custodian, it requires a separate subpoena for each of those different departments. And that's why you guys see that.
Right, let's not forget, a subpoena is a notice of deposition. The deposition process is what's compelling those records. And if there's two different witnesses, in other words, that entity says, if you want personnel records, you go see this person. If you want payroll records, you got to go see this other person. They're in different areas of the building, or they're, even in oftentimes completely different locations. They use a payroll company, If you have to deal with a separate person for the records, you should technically set a deposition for that person individually, and that's going to end up 2 different invoices.
Got it. And I think we find that too. And on the defense side, people ask that question, and we do have to serve where they're separate offices. They're not in the same exact place. Sometimes they're different. They have the same address, but it's building A, B, and D. So we have to go all those places separately.
It's twice the work. You pay twice the witness fees. It's worth 2 invoices.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So the next question we have here, Diann, is this claims person says they oftentimes get requests for records, and they object or they give a DNR, and a few weeks later they get another subpoena, and the only difference is the claim number is the same. However, the date of service for the subpoena is different. Why does this happen?
This is, I'm gonna have to speculate a little bit here. So,
Can I step in? Do you mind?
yeah, thanks, Mike.
No problem. It shouldn't happen. That's the truth, right? If you see that a copy service is doing this, I mean, this is one of those things where this area where a copy service, you should fight that bill and do not pay it. You should not see that.
Well, I can think of a reason. Let's say you served a subpoena and your subpoena, for example, the deposition date and time said forthwith. That's not legal. And so now a defense attorney who doesn't want to provide records objects to that or serves a petition to quash. And the applicant attorney calls the copy service back and says, hey, you fool, you messed this up. You know, you put forthwith on here or some other flaw. The copy service might correct it and serve it again. Now, I agree with these guys. That should only be one invoice because, you know, they did it wrong. It's not a cancellation. That'll end up being on one invoice. But the question specifically said, why would I get multiple subpoenas? The only logical reason I can think of is the first subpoena had an error and they were trying to fix it.
There you go.
Good point. All right, so Stephen, why would some copy services put on their original invoice the late service, the penalty for the 25% on their invoices from the get-go?
Okay, if they put that in and it looked just like a regular charge that they were supposed to pay even within the 30 days, that is an error. And I wouldn't pay it and I'd object to that. But I think probably what people are seeing is a note of some type on that invoice that says, hey, if you don't pay this within 30 days, I'm just letting you know about this new regulation in the fee schedule that increases this bill by 25%. And the reason they might do that is, you know, mailing isn't free. So if I mail you an invoice and then 30 days later, I got to send you a new invoice, that's a fee I have to pay to mail that invoice. That causes now confusion. You now have two different invoices and now you're suspicious because why is one 25% higher than the other? So all I think copy services are doing is responding to that new regulation that allows for a 25% increase and actually trying to do you a favor by saying, hey, just to let you know, if you don't pay this on time, it's going to go up by 25%.
I think you're right. I think it is a courtesy so that it is on there. So Stephen, question would be, how is that 30 days determined if you don't know when the payer is going to receive that invoice?
That's a great question. Really, everything we're doing in this industry now, since everything's gotten so technical and has deadlines and time limits, everything should be done with a proof of service. So I'm sure claims examiners have noticed in the past, 2 years or so, a lot of copy services are now using a proof of service to serve their invoice. And that proof of service is, it's going to establish when they mailed it out. And, of course, we know the law says 5 days later, you are deemed served. And so that's the way it should be calculated. If you get an invoice and you do not get a proof of service, you can argue it. You'd have to lie, but you'd probably get away with it because a judge is going to say, okay, Mr. Copy Service, let's see your proof of service showing that you actually served it. Mr. Claims Examiner over here says they didn't get it, so prove to me they got it. If they had a proof of service, which is an affidavit, it's a declaration, someone can be held accountable, then you got served 5 days later. And so that invoice date, the proof of service date plus 5 days for it to get to you, if it's 30 days beyond that, you're gonna have a hard time arguing against that.
Got it. So we are actually up against time. We have one last question. And so maybe Patty, you can start off with the answer, and Mike and Stephen or Dan, if you want to follow up on that. Basically, the question is that when they get a subpoena, when the defense orders a subpoena, they let the applicant side know, and then instead of getting records from the applicant side, they order their own records. And I believe we answered this earlier on, but is there a way, they want to know specifically if there's a way for the copy services to discuss this amongst each other so the duplication doesn't happen?
Well, now that we know each other through CPP, I suppose we could try to call all the applicant and copy services and ask them if they were doing a certain job, but we don't know, and we don't really communicate to the other copy service or the other attorney. We only communicate to our client, whoever gave us the job, but it goes both ways. I mean, sometimes we get copies of the applicant attorney subpoenas, and our client says, go get these records too. And we're like, righto, we'll go. And I think it happens the other way too. And I think that it's all based on trust. Do they trust us? Do they trust the applicant attorney copy service? I don't know what we could do not to have that happen.
Well,
And I think, sorry, and I think, this is kind of one of those areas where, we're trying hard not to duplicate efforts, and I can understand the question, and I can appreciate that as well. But, we have spent, the length of time that we are working with one of our firms, working with one of our clients, developing a relationship. And that relationship is built on trust, and they trust us to go get the records that they are requesting. And I think the same can be said for MacroPro and its clients. And so, it's just a matter really, truly of trust, and that they want to get the evidence and they want to get it from their preferred provider.
I have one question that I want to get a correction because I may have misstated the question, and I apologize for that. The question is, why is a subpoena served several months after the subpoena preparation date?
That doesn't make any sense to me.
No, I don't have a clue on that.
Yeah.
Even kind of outlined with a couple scenarios where it could have missed, it was a mistake, there was a mistake on it that had to get clarified.
Maybe
but even then, they would do a new issue date. I mean, you probably close that out and do a new, I just don't, you shouldn't see that, I don't believe.
Yeah, there is another comment here that someone says that we get paid 10 cents per page for anything over 500. I think, Dan, this was your copy job of 100,000 pages or something like that. But we do need to point out the fact that the 10 cents per page is on paper copies and not electronic. So that is something that Dan was mentioning getting help with. I think that's because there'd be no payments for a large paper job like that, and a lot, or I should say electronic, and most clients want electronic copies, not paper anymore. So just want to address that. Well, we have had some questions. We're not going to have time to answer those, but I would like to put in the chat box if you guys real quickly would like to tell us if you'd like a follow-up of this presentation with different questions. If you'd put that in the box, I'm going to leave that open for just a moment. Put down yes or whatever you would like. And any questions that we didn't answer today will be recorded, and I will be able to utilize those for the next time around if there is a next time around. So on behalf of MacroPro, we'd like to thank our friends today for coming and sharing and being willing to answer questions. The questions were very random, and we really appreciate it. Stephen, we appreciate your technical knowledge to be able to rattle things off on the top of your mind. Is mind-blowing to so many of us. Thank you. Dan, thank you so much for explaining, and Mike, also for your help on this. And Patty, always I want to thank you for making this webinar series even available to our clients and on a regular basis. All right, everybody, please put those questions in, and until the next time, we will talk to you later. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Diann. Thank you, MacroPro. Thank you, Patty.
Indeed.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
I'm just leaving it open for a moment. So if you guys would like to get off camera, that's totally fine. I just want to leave some time for people to reply whether or not they would like a second webinar. All right, I'm going to close down the webinar at this time. Again, thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
How do you guys feel?
We survived.
We did survive.
We are still on.